If you find you're unsettled listening today, reach out to a trusted friend or go to tradespodcast.com and click on resources.
We are men in the trades, forging health in the drug poisoning crisis. This is
Off the Clock Toolbox Talk.
Karen and Daniel here today. Our steering committee of Men in the Trades said they wanted to hear more about other guys' journeys and what worked for them. So let's jump right into Trevor's story. Okay, so we're here with Trevor Botkin today. And Trevor, do you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're coming from?
Yeah, so Trevor Botkin, I grew up, born in Vancouver, grew up on southern Vancouver Island. I went into the construction industry as a carpenter when I was 19 years old. I'm now 48. I've spent 20 some odd years, 27 years, 8 years in the construction industry, journeyman carpenter, became a framing foreman at 25, started my own business at 29, did that for about 6 years, came out of that, became a superintendent, and I've pretty much filled the superintendent space until about 4 years ago, where I started actually working for a local charity here in Victoria. I'm happy to do it. I'm proud to be in this space now where I'm comfortable with myself and where I don't hold any shame over this stuff anymore. And I keep getting called to sit for these, and I'm happy to do it. But I'm like, and I've tried to bring other people in, and just there's a lot, right? There's a lot of stigma and to worry, and not just on construction sites in general, but in public still, right?
Yeah. Oh, so much. I see it every day. One interesting thing that I've just been thinking about quite a bit from my early email conversations with you, Trevor, is we were talking about how a lot of the media things that have been attempting to reach people in the trades who are affected or at risk of this unregulated drug crisis or being affected by it. And you were kind of talking about how there's so many initiatives that are paid for by health authorities or Health Canada or whatever that aren't necessarily reaching the target because they're too soft, too clean, too clinical, and they're not getting down to the grit of new tagline for Off the Clock Toolbox is real fucking talk.
Yeah. So, that's what registers. Yeah, to expand on that, I don't. I just want to be clear. Like, if somebody's out there and their intention is to make a difference and save people, I'm in.
Yeah,
totally agree with what they're doing. On the other side, you're not gonna scare a lot of these men and women out of anything. If you were where I was at, I think I did an interview a long time ago. If you had your stuff tested and it came back with fentanyl in it, would you not have used it? Absolutely, I would have. I would have used less. I would have used it in what I thought was a safe manner. I was in a place where it didn't matter what the statistic was, it wasn't going to help me. I was just very deep into just a very challenging space in my addiction. And so I think, when we're talking to men and women out in the trades, and in this instance, I think particularly it's men that are passing away rather tragically. We're talking about men that are using alone. Obviously, they're dying with no help. There's something going off. There's a toxic drug supply there. There's some catalyst. We're not talking about job site injuries. We're not talking about job site accidents. We're not talking about using at work. We're talking about why are they dying in such high numbers outside of work? Like, why are men from the trades, skilled trades in construction and transport, I believe, why are they so highly representative in overdose deaths, whether it's toxic or otherwise? That's the nut to crack. And for me, what it boils down to, is just this thing. We just internalize everything.
right.
For me, I was really embarrassed. I had a lot of shame around who I was, the fact that I had this double life. I was one person on a job site. I'd leave and I was a completely different other person. For a long time, I didn't think I had a problem. I thought I was just like everybody else I knew that used. And then I entered into a space where my shit was definitely different than the people around me. So I started to retract. And I thought I could get a handle on it. And then after repeatedly failing and trying to get a handle on things, it moved into this place where I just felt defeated and absolutely had no hope. I felt broken. I felt weak. I knew I was in deep shit and I couldn't do anything about it. And I felt that if I reached out to anybody, that I was going to lose everybody. I thought I would lose my job. I'd lose the respect I had in my leadership ability. Parts of my family I knew I would lose. Other parts of family I just didn't want to embarrass that way.
Mhm.
Like we talk about losing our family. Like, do you really think you would have lost your mother? Fuck no. I was worried about embarrassing her and bringing shame to her, right?
Mhm.
So it's a complex issue. And when we look at, I empathize with some of the supports that are being put together right now, because they do have to walk a line, right? They have stakeholders to be cognizant of. They have to mind their language. They have to, and all that is going to still serve a purpose, which is bringing this attention to light. Whether it's on the employer side, bringing them into a conversation that they're willing to they're comfortable to stick at the table, and changing that culture around substance use for men in construction. But also I hope that it will, capture a few people that are open to hearing that, or initiate, it'll lead to this conversation we're having today, where somebody might say, fuck, I know exactly what that guy's talking about.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hey, Trevor, one of the things I'm hearing in your story is a little about you seemed to have really high ability to function and kind of maintain outward appearances, let's say, while you're going through that your addiction struggle. And I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on how that kind of double life, I guess you might call it, worked for you and worked against you, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a great example. So, whatever. I think I'm not abnormal. I'm not unlike a lot of drug users, and then and definitely, and we had rules around it, right? We'd only use on weekends. We'd only, and then that turned into, well, it's Thursday night's kind of a weekend, and I can't get my shit together on Sunday, so I might not be very presentable on Monday, and so it starts to bleed over, and then finally it blows up into something else. So those patterns I was in. I mean, my whole life was a pattern at that point, like a ritual around sort of using. It used to be work and using as a pastime, and then it became really about structuring everything so that I could use on weekends. I remember being super productive on Thursday, Friday, because I wanted to make sure Monday wasn't going to be overwhelming.
Mhm.
And so crossing all my T's, dotting all my I's. I like the term open secret, right? Like, a nudge, wink, we all know what we're doing on the weekend, because a lot of us are doing it together. And then as I transitioned into kind of a darker and darker place, and I've seen this with other people, I'd been there with other people that are kind of becoming the weak link, and they're starting to get in their shit. And the conversation with the guys is, hey, like, get your shit together, because they don't want it coming down on them.
Right.
Be guilty by association. And it's a reflection of where they're at too, right? So if somebody else is struggling and you're there with them every day, it's hard to justify you're technically, don't have the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
So people will start to ostracize that person a little bit. There's not a lot of support. We don't convey our feelings a lot. So there's not like, hey man, can I talk to you? I think I'm having a hard time with this.
Yeah.
That was not a conversation I ever had. I've had it with people that I'm charged with leading, in that, like, dude, I don't know what's going on for you. I suspect I know, but and I never used with people that I was in charge of. That was kind of one of my rules, and it got hard to maintain. So then I actually literally just had totally separate community that I used with. So it kind of graduated from this pattern of, using. I had one or two guys that knew kind of my secret, that we would kind of hang out on weekends with other people in the industry, but not necessarily with my company. Because for a long period of my life, everybody I knew was in construction. The hours I put in, and this isn't abnormal. Most of the people and hang out with, even outside of work, are people you work with or that are in the industry, that you've met through the years. So then that shifts to, slowly into this place where, the people that I hung out with and did drugs with were outside of the construction industry altogether. I started to, I was leading larger projects. I was very aware that this side of my life doesn't support this side at all. And in fact, it would lead to great damage. But I think at that time, I still thought it was manageable. I just didn't want people knowing my business.
Yeah.
Because of the stigma.
Yeah. That's right.
And judgment. And then as that got worse and worse, and I started to notice that it was different, then it really moved from something socially that I did to something completely alone.
What do you think drove that shift from going from a more like using more socially to using alone? And what was underneath that?
There's a complete lack of self-awareness, but in other ways, I think around the stigma and embarrassment, I think like I knew even among my other drug using friends, I was always one of the last three people, right? Like the party had ended days before, and it's the same fucking three people standing around the same kitchen table, mumbling the same stupid stories, and nobody knows what the fuck anybody's saying. And you're like, and I'm like, oh, you know, and so you just start to hide that. And in my mind, like I had a girlfriend at the time, I was like, you know, she's part of the problem. Like it, you know, we're codependent. I'm like, okay, you know, there's some of that self-awareness you have, right? But not totally accurate. I mean, to be clear, I'm the problem. I was the problem. And so I was like, okay, I'll get away from her and I'll get away from all these people. And then I'll be, you know, I tried to, you know, started trying to change everything around my drug use, like externally, that I thought would solve the problem and make it easier to quit. And then I keep, you know, they keep coming up. This solution didn't work either. This solution, because I didn't know. I mean, the last 6 years of my use, I did not want to be using. Absolutely did not want to be using.
What were some of those solutions that you tried that didn't work?
So
I just want to say about that, like, that's probably a good part of the process, trying things and finding out they didn't work and then trying something different. Like that.
And I know that now, like the clarity I have now after 4.5 years of therapy and really digging into this beast that is inside me. You know, back then I just saw failure, right? Like I wasn't proud of trying and failing. There was no part of me that was like, keep at it, Trevor, you'll get it. You know, like,
well, that's why you need cheerleaders in your life. You need people that got your back and that are there for you and are cheering you on, for sure.
Right.
Because,
but I had nobody around me, really. I didn't think. I mean, I had nobody around me I could talk about this. I had nobody around me that wasn't using drugs. Other than at work, really. I mean, and those guys they just didn't know. So like, who am I going to go to and say, like, I really need some, you know, some support here.
Right.
I mean, in the end, that was the answer, ironically. But like, even so, like I moved out of a house, I quit a job. I moved into my mom's basement because actually it started with just going home for Christmas. I left the girl, but I went home for Christmas because I never used it around my family. Like it was like this thing where but I'd never spent, you know, more than, you know, 5 days around my family, right? So it's but I was like, you know, I'll get
that's about enough,
start.
Right?
Yeah, I'll get this head start. I'll get clean, you know, and I ended up, you know, going home for Christmas. I didn't leave for 2 years. I ended up in my mom's basement. That was perfect. She had a 1-bedroom suite there, and it got me into this cycle of the pattern I'd stayed in for like the last 18 months of my addiction, which was just leaving my house, getting through a day of work. And I missed a lot of days of work, you know, coming home, fucking, to be totally honest, I'd leave work at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. I'd have my laptop flipped over on the center console of my Jeep. I'd be smashing rails on my way home in rush hour of cocaine. I'd get home. Then I'd start adding the ketamine around 5, 6 in the morning. I'd start the benzodiazepines so I could get out of my house again.
Wow, that's a rough ride, man.
Yeah, dude, it was significant. And you know what, back then I would never have told you that the benzos were a problem for me. Like
they probably might have been the hardest one to kick, I'm gonna guess.
Oh my God, terrible. But you know, it wasn't, I was like so delusional, right? Like I was just sick. I was a sick guy, you know, I was a sick guy. And I thought, you know, these benzos, I'm just using these so I can function during the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't believe I was overusing them. I didn't believe, well, holy crap, did I find out otherwise when I went to treatment. So, you know, in that time, so I ended up at my mom's house for Christmas that year, Christmas of 2017, end up in her basement. In that time, so I hit my first bottom. So I spent that time with my mom. I had been clean. It's New Year's Eve. I'm going to spend the whole night with my mom. I was like, Mom, I'm going to go to town. I'm going to grab a Dairy Queen. You good? Yep, she's fine. So I left. I didn't come back for 3 days. So I relapsed. I ended up in a friend of mine's empty house for 3 days, just absolutely the worst I'd been in. Like, you know, it's true. Like when, you know, one of the challenges is like, you know, if anybody out there is trying to quit, you try, you do your best, you string together a few days of 5 days, 7 days, 2 weeks, And then when you get back on it, that thirst, that hunt, that need, that like appetite for it is so next level. It's like,
Yeah, and this is when so many people are dying too right
oh
now
my
because
God.
their tolerance decreases. They don't know exactly how much they're using, the toxicity, unpredictability of the drug supply. Relapses are just so deadly, and there's no clear-cut solution to that because people are pursuing the pathways that are right for them. They're
Well, it's not
and
even that. Like for me, it just felt like it was out of my control.
yeah.
Like, looking back, like, we'll dig into like the effects on my family and me and the things that I forfeit, like just to get into like when we say it gets its hooks in you, like I don't think the average non-user, and if you don't understand it, then you've never been there, and good for you. I'm really happy you've never experienced it. But it's the terrifying, like I would have traded when I was in my shit without radical intervention. I was trading my relationships with my children, my family. I was missing holidays. I just wasn't showing up for people. I was going to lose my job. Like I was going to trade in the respect I had for my ability. And inevitably I was gambling with my life every fucking time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 4.5 years clean. I think I got a solid, 3.5 years into a toxic drug supply and an opioid pandemic. So
what were the major contributing factors that got to the point where you had to go into survival mode?
just honestly, it boils down to just not like feeling out of control and not being able to get back into control. So it became a battle of, okay, I can't let people find this out. I can't let people know. I have to like try and manage everything around it so that people don't find out my secret.
Yeah.
Right.
And what were the things that you didn't feel in control of? Like,
My
I'm
youth.
just thinking, is the schedule too much? Is, maintaining your relationship with your kids and a partner, is that too much? Like
Financial pressures.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my financial. Yeah.
Which is true for everybody right now.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
everybody
and it
in
doesn't help when like I don't know a
fucking
single
North
addict that
America
saves
right
money.
now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know in my addiction, I was shocked to discover afterwards, retrospect looking back is always so helpful, how much the financial burden was driving the continuation of my addiction. Let's say I was severely in debt and, was barely chipping away at the interest and so just digging a bigger hole every single month. And, came out of addiction, finally was able to resolve that issue, actually went through bankruptcy in order to repair it. And the weight that came off my shoulders and the moment of clarity that I had when I didn't have that burden, it was like this sudden light bulb of awareness that thing was crushing me and part of a massive driver in continuing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I got to be honest, the average listener may not like this. They were a medicine for me. Like the drugs really helped me for all the challenges I was dealing emotionally and mentally. And the trauma, like, and whether it's self-induced or not, I don't give a shit to even talk about. Like it's trauma and I have to deal with it. And I had no healthy place to deal with it. So financially, here we are, I'm 4.5 years clean now. I went into an organized payment of debt about 6 months after I got out of treatment. It was like, I think like I relate to what Daniel was saying. There was such an overwhelming sense of like, like to just know that I had to make that payment and that my phone wasn't ringing all the time. By the end of this year, I finished paying off all that debt. And by the end of this year, I finished off paying all my arrears to maintenance enforcement for my youngest daughter, which I'm super proud of. But in that moment, I'm chasing myself. Like I'm trying to run away from myself and this feeling that I don't belong in this world. I'm ashamed of who I am. I've stigmatized myself as a construction worker. Like I'm just a lowly framer,
Right.
and, who am I? So that's led me to being in a place where as a superintendent, I'm sitting at tables with people that have college educations and I'm diminishing my value there. And really like, it was a very uncomfortable place for me to be. I grew up not really fitting in. And when I came into the construction industry, I felt immediately like I was among my people. And so for many years before I was in leadership, I was in a space I was super comfortable in, super confident in. I worked hard, so I had the respect of the people around me. I think I've got a good sense of humor. And so two things started happening. I have a hard time saying no because I'm the guy that gets things done. I have almost like a spiteful energy when it comes to problems and problem clients or challenges. I'm like, no, we'll fucking get it done.
Yeah.
We'll fucking get it done.
Gives you purpose.
Yeah, that's my purpose. That's what I believe I'm here to do is fix things, right? So the irony is I couldn't fix myself. So really what happened is about 12 years ago, I really felt at the time like my whole life was problems. Like whether it was my own or dealing with other people's, I felt like I was inevitably going to collapse. I could have put an end to it. Like I just didn't have a way out. I didn't see a way out that didn't include me failing miserably and people saying that guy's an imposter. He's a fraud. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And then I would lose that thing I cherished so much in my life, which was respect and being the guy that gets shit done.
Yeah.
Respect is a strong leader. For me personally, in my ego, I was not prepared to cash those things in order to just wipe the slate clean.
Yeah.
I kept burying myself. And inevitably my drug use is going through the roof. I'm absolutely failing at things because I'm not functioning properly. I have no awareness around that. I don't know what is me just being broken and this narrative in my mind that I'm a failure and that I've been fooling people my whole life and that people hate me and they're just being polite and putting up with me. And what part is the drugs and the symptoms and the, right? So I don't know what that is. And I'm like, of course, the drugs are the only thing I have. Imagine for 2 minutes, like you're living in that much anxiety, and imagine in a single line of cocaine, you feel like you got it. That is a euphoria. That is such a rapid de-escalation of the emotions inside of me.
It's effective. It works.
It fucking works. And it doesn't work for long.
Temporary.
But imagine being in a place where you'll take 24 hours of further misery to have fucking 45 minutes of peace inside of you, thinking that you can give yourself a pep talk.
Well, we're hitting on something here that's really important and that I really like that you're bringing up, because this idea of substances, the drug addiction, serving a purpose. And while you use the word medicine, and I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can look at it, but it's helping an individual cope. And I think I had a very simplistic, perhaps, way of thinking about addiction during my early years in it. I thought really the problem was the drugs. Stop taking the drugs, the problem goes away. And there was very little understanding that actually, no, the drugs really aren't the problem. Right now, they're actually acting as a solution to a problem. I just don't get it. I don't even really know how to articulate what that problem is, which is really, it's in my heart and mind. And
I'm speaking through, like I said, the clarity of 4.5 years of treatment. So, and therapy. So back then, I just was like, before I got to know it, like feeling the drugs were a problem, I felt the drugs were the solution for sure. Like I was like, fuck, I just got to get out and do a couple lines. I wasn't seeing negative impacts in my life, not necessarily. I thought they were two separate issues. And then as it wasn't, like I kind of joke, nobody knows they have a problem until they try and quit and can't. And that's what started to repeatedly happen. I was like, oh, these are getting carried away. I used it on Wednesday night. That's against my rules. I gotta no more using on Wednesday nights. And then the next Wednesday night, you're high, and Tuesday night. And I'm like, okay, now I know the drugs are a problem and I can't fucking quit doing them. I'm just like terrified now. Like I've got nothing. And it just feels like the whole world was just starting to close in on me.
What was playing in your mind when you were stuck in that place and you feel hopeless? Like, how do you climb out of that pit of darkness? And
I felt weak. I felt very, like I'd been a leader in construction, but I was also kind of a leader. I was kind of that dad figure in my drug use community. And, I was supposed to be the guy I had my shit together. People would comment on it. Like I really admire how you can keep the two things separate. And you just, I'm like, oh yeah, I got my shit together. And, it was this whole thing, right? So when you build that image around yourself, it gets really, really challenging to like, that was my ego. That's why I thought people liked me, if they did at all. Like I was, and I came up not being treated well by my contemporaries in school and being a very awkward young man. But we have all these people coming into the industry that are, I think, carrying more than the average share of baggage in a lot of instances. And we're not wired or programmed in the industry to like seek help and talk to people and talk about our emotions and get help. We're like, yeah, you toughen up, you suck it up, you get on site. I'm really proud of it. And I'm proud of the men and women that go out there every day and grind it out in the heat and the cold, and they lift the heavy shit and they pack the heavy shit and they cut themselves, scrape themselves, blow their backs out. Like, come on. I grew up with a father who was a police officer, and he set the bar high as far as what being a man and showing up in the community is about. He's a very community-minded person, did a lot of stuff outside of his work. And I was supposed to go to university, and I decided I didn't want to. I was sick of school, and I just really felt at home on construction sites. I grew up on a farm. My dad, I have anything you want in life, son, as long as you work hard for it. There's no problem in life you can't solve by being at work every day. This is the stuff that got hammered into me when I was a teenager, and I'd be hungover in the morning after going out. He would wake me up at 7 a.m. and just make me dig a hole to fill it back in again. Right? Like, it was tough. It was tough. You work for it, and I really admire. I still do admire my father, but it took me a lot of therapy to find out, like,
oh, is there some trauma there, Trevor?
Yeah, there's some trauma there, right? And he came by it honestly. That's the way he was raised. He's a Saskatchewan farm boy.
Yeah.
But even my mother, like, I love her to death. But and I'm guilty of the same thing still as I'm sitting here. There's nobody in my life who wouldn't say I'm on a workaholic.
Question for you. What do you think is underneath that workaholic thing? Because, like, I know for me, it was connected to trying to prove that I'm not the failure that I believed I was.
Yes.
And that seems like such a common theme for so many people. That's underneath this outward facade that we put on, we look like we have it together, but we believe we're worthless pieces of shit.
Oh yeah. If I was secure, like even sitting here today, if I was 100% secure myself and okay, I'd be like, yeah, I can't make it. No, I can't help you with that. No. It's very hard for me because I'm like, if I'm not useful to somebody, my identity, my self-worth is still wrapped up in what I produce for other people. And family, friends, work, community, you name it. It can be, it's a great drive, but it needs to be a handle on it. For me personally, it was also covered with, looking at my dad, and I put my father in such a pedestal in my life. He passed away when I was 25. So, I've got 5 years or 6 years into the job site culture at that point. I'm starting to make a really good wage and get a lot of respect. Actually, I took my first leadership position as a foreman at 25, a framing foreman on commercial sites. And so, like, I'm just starting to get the ball rolling and getting that sense of pride and, oh, my dad loved this, he loves this, and really kind of getting that sense of like, I've made it. And then my dad dies, and I'm like, fuck. And I really became immediately aware at 25 how much I didn't know and where I wasn't, right? And that narrative started to amplify. And I'm always holding myself to this standard or this image that my dad set, which looking back was not what it looked like on the outside either. Now that I can play the tape through, he was human. But in my mind at that time, I was like, if I can't be that guy, I'm a failure, and he won't be proud, which is bullshit. My dad's proud of me sitting here right now, and he's been proud of me my whole life. I guarantee it. With this insecurities and the trauma I had from the bullying I took on, and some of it just, I think some people just naturally doubt themselves without any encouragement from anybody else. And then that seed will catch and something will confirm it. And then they'll hear something from somebody else, and it just flourishes like any other blossom on the planet, right? So, and then that just started growing in me at 25, and just working endless hours. I lost a relationship over it, and then the partying became a real big thing. And it's like, you work hard, play hard, because that was part of the image too. And I had to keep up with these guys. It wasn't like, I've always looked at my career as a battle, like building these buildings and putting this stuff together. It's a battleground, man. We're fighting through extremes. We're lifting heavy stuff, and so, when you get people come in that have it, like, they're like, whoa, this is like a career and a job. I'm going to go home at 4.
Yeah.
I'm going to spend time with my girlfriend and my family. And I'm like, oh, you got to get to work. But I remember, like, as a young leader telling people, like, look, Mike, you're bringing a lot of your personal life to work with you. I need you to leave it at home, man. I need you to be here and be focused and be producing. That's terrible. It's a terrible thing for anybody to say,
Yeah.
and later in life that started to shift even in my sickness.
But this is the beautiful thing, I think, of where we are with technology and everything else right now, is that you don't have to go to school for 4 years and become, get your degree in psychology to understand these concepts.
Yeah.
We've got podcasts now, we've got books, we've got and people, and it doesn't have to be delivered in such a clinical way. It's exactly what we're doing conversationally. And we can learn now in these different ways. So you can build skills and you can take that. We don't have to keep doing what we've been fucking doing for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right?
And it's inspiring people to see past that because, unfortunately, like you said, we come into a culture where it's very confrontational and very sort of in your face, direct, base logic. And, it's, basic, punchy, very jabby personal relationships, and it's fun and games, and then it wears on you and you become this crusty guy my age. And that's the language so when anything is delivered to you without an F-bomb in it, you're like, that's fucking garbage.
Exactly.
I'm gonna sit here and die slowly and alone, because that's the stoic thing to do. And it's it's trying to cut through that and say, hey guys, there's a better way, man.
Yeah.
Like this, you can be a human being and you'll get more respect for it. And you can be kind to your apprentices, the people that you lead. And
you can be kind to yourself.
And that's where it all starts, doesn't it?
That's where it all starts.
We talk about people picking on each other on job sites and inclusion. It's like, these guys are picking on each other and themselves just as much. They're including themselves in that.
Trevor, I'm curious, because the shame and the fear that's associated with being the guy with the addiction and not wanting it to be exposed on a job site or to employers. And now I think you're on the flip side of that, where you might have people working under you or around you that have substance use struggles.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, what can you do, or what do you do to communicate to those folks, because they may that you're safe to talk to?
The first thing I do is just being very transparent and direct and in everyone's face about who I am. I am who I am. I'm going to accept that. There's a few things that are tricky that I'd like to be able to be more conscious about. So when I take that and embody that in my actions, in the way I talk to people come out of the ether and they're like, dude, can I talk to you? Yeah. And I can't tell you. And if there's anybody listening to this, share. If you, and think about it, don't just say Trevor said to you and I'm going to share it and now I'm being penalized. Some people have walked away from me. There is tension, but fuck it. Those are not people I need near me anyways. I need real, honest and genuine people in my life that are going to tell me as it is and accept me for who I am. The reality is, if you decide you have the shoulders and you want to carry your story publicly and recover out loud, I call it, people will come forward. You're going to create a space where people are going to come to you on the side and say, look, man, when we start inviting these organizations in to do these toolbox talks and to have these conversations, there's an opportunity for leadership to be like, you know what you just heard today, I want the best things for you. And if you're struggling, I encourage you to come to me. You'll find a safe space to talk about these things. I in no way can have somebody in an unsafe condition at work, but I can create that space. And with all these phone numbers and all these reasons, we can encourage you to get to a safe space so you can come back to us. I'm not going to fire you because I understand you have a problem and I want to be there on the other side. So I'm just a framer. I'm not some celebrity. I'm not a millionaire. I've come up during the trades. So I went to treatment, something took hold. And as you've pointed out, sometimes it takes, the public needs to know it's not one and done. It can take many, many times. I've got lots of friends that are still struggling after 6 times in treatment. I have friends that are in treatment right now, the 7th time. Beautiful, wonderful people that are hard at this. I also know people that are like, it's too fucking hard. And what I know about those persons, they are also beautiful and they deserve not to die. And that's what harm reduction's for.
The hole wasn't dug in a day, and you didn't pull yourself out in
Yeah.
a day either. And these great accomplishments took time.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes in addiction, I know I felt this tremendous pressure and burden to get it all together tomorrow.
Totally.
You know,
and if I can't, I'm a failure.
Yes. And it's like, we need to celebrate incremental change. And if that for some people looks like, hey, even just reducing your use because the idea to jump into total abstinence, it seems overwhelming, then great. Like, that's a step forward.
Yeah.
The minute I forgave myself, I was able to stand up on my 2 feet, take responsibility for who I was and the way I was living, and start to finish and fix these things. And I'll tell you, my daughters, the most important people in my life, aren't going to tell you that they think it was selfish that I forgive myself. They're certainly happy I can come out with a smile on my face and we can talk about these things, and I'm not in a mess of tears begging for forgiveness all the time, because they see it in my actions. They see it that I come to visit them now. And when they come to visit me, I don't have to cancel because I'm in a basement high as fuck. Right? So it's, when we talked about that financial burden, I chart like how, like my cell phone bill is like one of these things that I'm like, fucking yeah. I got my bill the other day. It was negative $100.44. I'm like, yeah, fucking right. I'm 98% effective in getting my garbage to the corner on garbage day, and 97% effective in following it up on Tuesday, every second Tuesday, get my recycling to curb. You would not believe how much solace I take in that now. Like, and before, life was all these grand, big gestures and huge, important things that need to be done. And now I'm like, fuck, I get my garbage out to the curb on Monday and I'm like, attaboy. If construction workers, these guys, I tell you, we all think we're so tough, but why are we dying? So why are we dying off the job site? If you're so tough, and if you're so tough, why can't you talk about your feelings? Why is it so tough to confide in somebody as a man, to listen to somebody else and give them safe? And honestly, I think men talking about their feelings probably would find more audience than they fear they would.
It starts with you. You got to be the one. I mean, you can't always wait on someone else to start it. So just go for it.
And if you're in a position where other people are asking you, are you okay? You're probably in a tough spot.
People will find out over time that you're vulnerability is strength, and it's a weird thing because it's counterintuitive, right?
I saw Brené Brown gave this example once. Is like we watch people share their challenges and their stories of overcoming obstacles in life, and we sit in the audience and we look up to this person and we're like, oh my God, that's so inspiring, what an amazing person. But we will not give ourselves that same credit. And so I tell people that I work with in early recovery, and I say don't forget to sit and look in the mirror and tell yourself your own story in the third person.
We don't
tell yourself your own story, and then try not to be proud of that person. But you need to start stepping outside of yourself and looking at yourself objectively rather than intellectually or with your emotions, and just say, holy fuck.
Yeah.
Look what I've done. And that comes back to what you're saying earlier about, like, there's no awareness that you're like trying. Why are you not proud that you're trying?
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to change your life. You're trying to change your circumstance. You're trying. You're not going to be successful all at once. But why can't we start with being proud of just fucking taking the first step?
And then
take this first step 20 times.
Treat the journey like it's a learning experience. It's not a series of failures and victories. It's a learning journey.
Thank you so much, Trevor. That was really great.
Yeah. Anything you need, let me know. Happy to be of service. 4 years ago, where I started actually working for a local charity here in Victoria. Hero Work is a charity that renovates other charities. So if you imagine Extreme Home Makeover, we do that, but for another charity. So we'll go in with thousands of volunteers and sponsors and donors, and we'll completely reimagine their space so that they can help more people in a better way with greater outcomes for many, many years to come.
Awesome. We'll put a link to Hero Work in the show notes as well, so people can go check that out.
Yeah, victoria.herowork.com.
This has been a Fraser House Society project, hosted by Daniel Snyder, co-hosted and produced by Karen Jansen, managed by Delan Young, from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Production of this material has been made in part through a financial contribution of Health Canada. The views expressed herein do not necessarily reflect the views of Health Canada or Fraser House Society. The content of this podcast is conversation between people with living experience and should not be taken as professional advice. Special thanks to Off the Clock Toolbox Talk supporters victoria.herowork.com and thetailgatetoolkit.ca. Help save lives! Go to tradespodcast.com to find tools and tips to promote the podcast on your site with minimal stressors. Like us on socials and follow us on your preferred podcast platform so that you get notified when new episodes are released. Send us constructive feedback in any form you'd like. tradespodcast@gmail.com. Help us, help you.